The marble floor of St. Catherine Hospital gleamed under crystal chandeliers as Kesha Washington stepped through the revolving glass doors. 8 months pregnant and exhausted after a long day teaching third graders, she moved slowly, one hand supporting her lower back, the other clutching a worn leather purse. Her simple cotton dress and comfortable flats made her stand out starkly against the opulent surroundings where Prada bags and designer suits were the norm. The waiting area buzzed with quiet conversations in cultured tones. Elderly women in Chanel suits whispered behind manicured hands while their husbands checked gold watches. Children in pressed uniforms sat obediently beside their parents, stealing curious glances at the newcomer who clearly didn't belong in their exclusive world. "Excuse me!" The sharp voice cut through the refined atmosphere like a knife. Patricia Jackson, a nurse with 20 years of experience in maintaining the hospital's unspoken hierarchy, emerged from behind the reception desk. Her white uniform was pristine, her blonde hair pulled back in a severe bun that matched her expression. "This isn't a free clinic. You need to leave immediately." Every conversation stopped. Every eye turned to watch the spectacle unfold. The air grew thick with tension as patients and their families witnessed what they'd come to expect: the swift removal of anyone who didn't meet their standards. Kesha straightened her shoulders, her hand instinctively moving to protect her unborn child. Her voice remained calm, dignified, utterly controlled. "I have a 3 o'clock appointment with Dr. Martinez. Here's my insurance card." Patricia didn't even glance at the offered card. "Fake insurance? Really? Security? We have someone causing a disturbance here." But Patricia Jackson had no idea that the next phone call would shatter her comfortable world of assumptions and prejudice. She couldn't imagine that this quiet, pregnant woman possessed the power to bring their entire system crashing down with a single conversation. Kesha's dark eyes flashed with something dangerous as she reached for her phone. The real battle was about to begin. Kesha Washington wasn't the type of woman you could easily categorize. In her classroom at Lincoln Elementary, she was Ms. Washington to 28 children who adored her. She taught them about history, about brave souls who changed the world through courage and intelligence, about standing up for what's right, even when the odds seemed impossible. Today, however, standing in this marble palace of medicine, she was just another pregnant black woman who'd made the mistake of believing she deserved the same treatment as everyone else. The shooting pain in her lower back had forced her to leave school early, something she hated doing. Her students were preparing for their history presentation on civil rights heroes, and she'd promised to help them practice. "Honey, why don't you let me drive you?" Benjamin had asked that morning, noticing the way she winced when she stood up from their kitchen table. His concern was genuine, the same loving attention he'd shown her since their college days. "You have that board meeting with the investors. I can handle a simple doctor's appointment." Kesha had always been fiercely independent, sometimes to a fault. She'd worked 3 jobs to help put Benjamin through medical school, never once complaining, never once asking for special treatment. They'd met at University of Michigan when Benjamin was a broke medical student from Detroit's roughest neighborhood, and she was studying education on a scholarship. They'd built their life together from nothing. Late nights, studying, shared dreams, and an unshakable belief that hard work and love could overcome anything. "Don't ever let success change who you are," she'd told him during those early struggling years. And Benjamin never had, at least not with her. He remained the same gentle, passionate man who'd fallen in love with her fierce spirit and unwavering principles. But the outside world didn't know their story. They saw only what they wanted to see. A black woman in simple clothes, obviously out of place in their exclusive environment. They couldn't see the PhD in education hanging on her classroom wall, the dozens of thank you letters from grateful parents, or the Teacher of the Year awards she'd earned through dedication and excellence. Kesha rubbed her belly as the baby kicked strongly, as if sensing her mother's rising tension. "Don't worry, sweetheart," she whispered. "Mama's about to teach these people a lesson they'll never forget." St. Catherine Hospital wasn't just a medical facility. It was a monument to social stratification. The 15-story glass tower dominated the city skyline, its gleaming facade reflecting clouds and wealth in equal measure. Despite serving a community that was 30% African American, only 2% of their patients shared Kesha's heritage. This wasn't by accident. The waiting room resembled a luxury hotel lobby more than a medical facility. Italian leather sofas arranged in perfect symmetry around mahogany coffee tables laden with copies of Architectural Digest and Financial Times. The scent of imported roses from the massive floral arrangement mingled with the subtle fragrance of expensive perfumes worn by the clientele. Unspoken rules governed this space, with the rigidity of written law. Your skin color determined which seating area you could access. Your clothing determined how quickly staff responded to your needs. Your accent determined whether anyone bothered to listen when you spoke. Mrs. Eleanor Henderson, 72 years old and draped in enough jewelry to fund a small school, occupied the premium seating near the floor-to-ceiling windows. Her Hermes bag sat protectively in her lap as she observed Kesha with the detached interest of someone watching an unwelcome insect. "Why do they allow those people in here?" she murmured to her companion, not bothering to lower her voice. "Surely they have facilities more appropriate for their circumstances." Even the children had absorbed these lessons. 7-year-old Madison Worthington tugged her mother's designer sleeve, whispering loudly, "Mommy, why is that lady dressed like our housekeeper?" "Shush, darling," her mother replied, pulling the child closer. "Don't stare at people who don't belong here." The message was clear and consistent. This was a place for people of means, people of breeding, people who understood their position in the natural order of things. Kesha's presence disrupted that carefully maintained ecosystem, and the inhabitants were determined to restore balance by any means necessary. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow prisms across marble floors that had been polished to mirror perfection. Oil paintings of distinguished white men in medical coats lined the walls, their stern faces seeming to judge anyone who dared enter their domain without proper credentials, meaning the right color skin and the right size bank account. The reception desk stood like an altar of exclusion, its ornate carved wood and brass fittings designed to intimidate rather than welcome. Behind it, a carefully selected staff maintained the gatekeeping function that preserved the hospital's exclusive character. Patricia Jackson had perfected the art of exclusion over 2 decades of service at St. Catherine. She prided herself on maintaining standards, on preserving the quality experience that their distinguished clientele expected and deserved. In her mind, she wasn't being racist, she was being practical. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step outside while we sort this out," Patricia announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to immediate compliance. "We have protocols to follow, and frankly, your situation seems questionable." The waiting room fell silent, except for the soft classical music playing through hidden speakers. Patients who had been engrossed in quiet conversations now watched with barely concealed fascination. This was entertainment, a real-life drama playing out before their eyes. Kesha remained remarkably composed, her teacher's training evident in her controlled demeanor. "My situation? I'm a pregnant woman with a scheduled appointment and valid insurance. What exactly seems questionable about that?" "Well, for starters, this insurance card." Patricia held it between 2 fingers as if it might contaminate her. "Medicaid fraud is a serious federal crime. We see fake cards all the time from people trying to access services they can't afford." "That's a Blue Cross Blue Shield Platinum card," Kesha replied evenly. "Perhaps you should run it through your system before making accusations." Patricia's laugh was sharp and condescending. "Honey, I've been doing this longer than you've been alive. I know a fake when I see one, and even if this were real, which I doubt, we're fully booked today. You'll need to try the county hospital across town. The security guard, a burly man named Marcus who usually handled actual emergencies, approached reluctantly. He'd heard this script before, watched this same scene play out whenever someone like Kesha dared to enter their sanctuary. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave voluntarily, or we'll need to escort you out," Marcus said, his discomfort obvious. He'd grown up in the same neighborhood as Kesha, recognized the quiet dignity in her bearing that reminded him of his own mother. "I understand you're just doing your job," Kesha told him gently, then turned back to Patricia. "But I'm not leaving until I receive the medical care I'm entitled to. My baby is due in 4 weeks, and I have concerns that need professional attention." Patricia's eyes narrowed. "Security cameras are recording everything. When we call the police, and we will, they'll see exactly what happened here. A woman refusing to leave private property after being asked multiple times." From her corner seat near the window, Dorothy Chen had been observing the confrontation with growing discomfort. At 83, she'd lived through enough history to recognize injustice when she saw it. Her own family had faced discrimination when they'd immigrated from Taiwan 60 years ago, though nothing as blatant as what she was witnessing now. "Excuse me," Dorothy said, rising slowly from her chair with the aid of her carved wooden cane. Her voice carried the authority that came with age and hard-won wisdom. "I've been sitting here for 45 minutes, and I've watched this young woman conduct herself with nothing but grace and dignity." The waiting room's attention shifted to this unexpected intervention. Dorothy Chen was a familiar figure at St. Catherine. Her late husband had been a prominent surgeon here, and her substantial donations had funded an entire wing of the children's hospital. "Mrs. Chen, please don't concern yourself with this situation," Patricia said quickly, her tone notably more respectful. "We're handling everything according to policy." "Policy?" Dorothy's weathered face showed genuine confusion. "Since when is it policy to accuse patients of insurance fraud without verification? Since when do we treat pregnant women like criminals?" A murmur rippled through the assembled patients. Some nodded in agreement, while others shifted uncomfortably in their designer seats. The clear lines of us versus them were beginning to blur. "Furthermore," Dorothy continued, her voice gaining strength, "I've been coming to this hospital for 30 years, and I've never seen anyone's insurance questioned so aggressively. This young woman presented her card politely and explained her appointment. What exactly has she done wrong?" Patricia's confident demeanor began to crack. "Mrs. Chen, with all due respect, we have procedures in place for a reason. Not everyone who walks through these doors belongs here." "Belongs here?" Dorothy's cane tapped sharply against the marble floor. "This is a hospital, not a country club. The last time I checked, medical care was a human right, not a privilege based on appearance." The gathered audience began to fracture along moral lines. Some patients looked ashamed of their earlier assumptions, while others maintained their superior expressions. But doubt had been planted, and the unanimous support for Patricia's actions was crumbling. The commotion had reached the administrative offices on the second floor, where head nurse Rebecca Mitchell was reviewing patient satisfaction surveys. 28 years of experience had taught her to handle delicate situations with surgical precision, eliminating problems before they could escalate into public relations disasters. Rebecca descended the marble stairs like a general taking command of a battlefield. Her navy blue suit spoke of authority. Her silver hair was styled to perfection, and her smile could have cut glass. She understood the delicate dance of maintaining exclusivity while avoiding obvious discrimination. "Good afternoon, everyone," Rebecca said, her voice projecting calm professionalism. "I'm Rebecca Mitchell, head of patient services. I understand we have a small misunderstanding that needs clarification." She approached Kesha with practiced sympathy, her expression carefully crafted to suggest concern rather than hostility. "Mrs. Washington," Kesha Washington. Mrs. Washington, I sincerely apologize for any confusion. Sometimes our staff can be overly cautious about verifying insurance coverage. It's nothing personal, you understand. We've had issues with fraudulent claims in the past. The words sounded reasonable, even compassionate, but Kesha recognized the technique. She'd seen administrators use similar tactics when trying to remove problematic parents from school board meetings. I appreciate your concern, Kesha replied, but my insurance is valid, my appointment is confirmed, and I'm experiencing pregnancy complications that require immediate attention. Rebecca's smile never wavered. Of course, and we want to help. However, looking at our schedule, Dr. Martinez is completely booked today. Perhaps we could arrange something at our community clinic. It's much more convenient for people in your situation. The suggestion hung in the air like a noxious gas. Everyone understood the coded language. The community clinic was where people like Kesha belonged, away from the paying customers who expected better. My situation? Kesha's voice remained steady, but fire flickered behind her eyes. You mean my pregnancy? Or do you mean something else entirely? Oh, certainly not, Rebecca backpedaled smoothly. I simply meant that our community partnership program offers excellent care at a more affordable price point. It might be a better fit for your needs. Kesha felt the baby kick strongly, as if responding to her rising stress levels. The pain in her back intensified, and for the first time, genuine worry clouded her determination. She needed medical attention, but these people seemed determined to deny her the care she was entitled to receive. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for her phone. She'd hoped to handle this independently, to avoid involving Benjamin in what should have been a routine appointment. But sometimes even the strongest people needed to call for backup. Kesha's fingers moved across her phone with deliberate precision. The waiting room watched in silence as she placed the call, most assuming she was calling a friend or relative to pick her up after her inevitable defeat. Benjamin? It's me. I'm at St. Catherine Hospital and we have a problem. Her voice was quiet but carried perfectly in the tense atmosphere. I need you here. Now. Patricia rolled her eyes dramatically. Let me guess. Calling your baby daddy to come 'cause a scene? That's not going to change anything, sweetheart. 5 minutes passed in uncomfortable silence. The soft music continued playing, but tension filled the space like smoke. Some patients returned to their magazines, while others continued watching Kesha with curiosity or disdain. Then came the sound that would change everything, the deep rumble of a luxury engine pulling up to the hospital's main entrance. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, everyone could see a midnight blue Bentley Continental arriving at the valet station. The car door opened, and Dr. Benjamin Washington emerged like a force of nature. 6 feet 3 inches of controlled power, dressed in a perfectly tailored Armani suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. His presence commanded attention even from a distance as he handed his keys to the valet and strode toward the entrance with purposeful steps. The revolving door whispered as he entered, and every conversation died instantly. This was clearly a man of significant means and influence, exactly the type of person who belonged in St. Catherine's exclusive environment. What confused the assembled crowd was his obvious destination. He walked directly toward the pregnant black woman they'd been trying to remove. Kesha, baby, are you all right? Benjamin's voice carried the concern of a devoted husband mixed with the barely contained fury of a man whose family had been threatened. Patricia's face went white as understanding began to dawn. Rebecca's professional smile faltered as she recognized the magnitude of their mistake. The waiting room held its collective breath as the pieces of the puzzle clicked into place. Benjamin's eyes swept the room, taking in his wife's stressed expression, the hostile faces of the staff, and the uncomfortable silence that had replaced normal conversation. When he spoke again, his voice was ice-cold steel wrapped in silk. I need to know exactly what happened here. Someone explain to me why my pregnant wife is being treated like a criminal in my own hospital." "Your hospital?" Patricia stammered, her earlier confidence evaporating like morning mist. Benjamin Washington straightened to his full height, his presence filling the space with undeniable authority. "I am Dr. Benjamin Washington, Chief Executive Officer and majority shareholder of St. Catherine Hospital. I own 51 others, just like it, across 12 states. And you just made the worst mistake of your career." The marble floors seemed to vibrate with the weight of Benjamin's words. Patricia's face drained of all color as the full implications crashed over her like a tsunami. Rebecca's professional composure crumbled as she realized they'd just committed career suicide in the most public way possible. "Security cameras," Benjamin said, his voice cutting through the stunned silence like a scalpel. "I want the footage from the last hour reviewed immediately. Every word, every action, every display of unprofessional conduct." Marcus, the security guard who'd been reluctantly following orders, stepped forward with obvious relief. "Dr. Washington, sir, I can tell you exactly what happened. These ladies refused to verify Mrs. Washington's insurance, accused her of fraud, and tried to have her removed despite her having a confirmed appointment." Benjamin's jaw tightened as he listened to the account. His eyes never left Patricia and Rebecca, who stood frozen like deer in headlights. "Bring me the security footage. Now. And I want both of your supervisors down here immediately." "Sir, there might be some misunderstanding," Rebecca began, her voice barely above a whisper. "The only misunderstanding," Benjamin interrupted, "is how two grown women could look at my wife, a woman with a doctorate in education, a respected teacher, and a human being carrying my child, and decide she didn't deserve basic human dignity." He turned to address the entire waiting room, his voice carrying to every corner of the space. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want you all to witness this moment. What you've seen here today represents everything we're working to eliminate from modern healthcare." Patricia tried one last desperate defense. "Dr. Washington, we were just following protocol. We have to be careful about insurance fraud." "Protocol." Benjamin's voice rose slightly, the only sign of his mounting rage. "Show me the protocol that says you interrogate black patients more aggressively than white ones. Show me the policy that authorizes you to make assumptions about people based on their skin color." The silence was deafening. Even the soft background music seemed to pause in recognition of this pivotal moment. "Patricia Jackson and Rebecca Mitchell, you are terminated immediately. Security will escort you from the premises, and you will never work in healthcare again if I have any influence over the matter." Benjamin's words carried the finality of a judge's gavel. "You can't do this," Patricia protested, her voice rising to a near shriek. "I have rights. This is discrimination." "Discrimination?" Benjamin's laugh was cold as Arctic wind. "You want to talk about discrimination? Let's discuss how you treated my wife, a paying customer with confirmed insurance and a scheduled appointment. Let's talk about the assumptions you made based solely on her appearance." Rebecca made one final attempt at damage control. "Dr. Washington, perhaps we could discuss this privately. I'm sure we can reach some understanding. The time for private discussions ended when you decided to humiliate my wife in public. Your actions have consequences, and those consequences start right now." Benjamin's attention turned to the assembled patients and staff who had gathered to witness the unprecedented confrontation. His voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to commanding boardrooms and operating theaters, but also the passion of a man defending his family's honor. "Everyone in this room has learned something today," he began, his words echoing off the marble walls. "You've seen how quickly assumptions can be shattered, how dangerous it is to judge people by their appearance or their circumstances." He gestured toward Kesha, who stood with quiet dignity despite everything she'd endured. "My wife is Dr. Kesha Washington, holder of a PhD in education from the University of Michigan, Teacher of the Year 3 times running, and one of the most intelligent, compassionate people I've ever known. But none of that should matter. The crowd listened in complete silence, many looking ashamed of their earlier reactions and assumptions. What should matter is that she's a human being who deserves respect and quality medical care. What should matter is that every person who walks through these doors, regardless of their race, their clothing, or their perceived social status, receives the same level of professional treatment. Dorothy Chen, the elderly woman who had first spoken up for Kesha, began to clap slowly. The sound echoed through the vast space, and gradually others joined in. First a few scattered individuals, then nearly everyone present. Effective immediately, Benjamin continued. St. Catherine Hospital is implementing new policies. Any employee found guilty of discriminatory behavior will be terminated without appeal. We're installing additional security cameras with audio recording capabilities, and we're establishing a patient advocacy program to ensure every person receives equal treatment. He paused, looking directly at several patients who had earlier shown hostility toward Kesha. I want everyone to remember this moment. Remember how wrong your first impressions were. Remember that dignity and respect aren't privileges to be earned. They're rights to be honored. Marcus, the security guard, stepped forward. Dr. Washington, sir, I want to apologize for my part in this. I should have spoken up sooner. Marcus, you were following orders from supervisors who gave you incorrect information. That's why we're changing the system. From now on, every employee has not just the right, but the obligation to report discriminatory behavior, regardless of who's giving the orders. The transformation in the waiting room was palpable. Conversations resumed, but now they carried a different tone. Children asked their parents quiet questions about what they'd witnessed. Adults exchanged uncomfortable glances as they confronted their own biases. My wife came here today for routine prenatal care, Benjamin concluded. She should have been treated with the same courtesy and professionalism we extend to every other patient. Instead, she became an unwilling teacher in a lesson about human decency that apparently some adults still needed to learn. Word of the incident spread through social media within hours, but not in the way anyone expected. Instead of outrage and calls for boycotts, the story became a powerful example of accountability and immediate justice. Videos taken by patients in the waiting room showed Dr. Washington's measured response and his commitment to systemic change. The local chapter of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People issued a statement praising the hospital's swift action. Too often, we see institutions make empty promises about diversity and inclusion, said Chapter President Maria Rodriguez. Dr. Washington demonstrated that real change requires immediate consequences for discriminatory behavior. Medical schools across the region began incorporating the incident into their ethics curricula. The case study became required reading in healthcare administration programs, illustrating both the persistence of unconscious bias and the importance of decisive leadership in addressing it. Marcus, the security guard who had reluctantly followed discriminatory orders, was promoted to patient advocate coordinator. His new role involved training staff on recognizing and preventing discriminatory behavior. Dr. Washington gave me a second chance to do the right thing, he explained to new employees during orientation sessions. Local news outlets covered the story extensively, but the focus remained on the positive changes rather than sensationalizing the conflict. Dr. Washington used media interviews to highlight the broader issues of healthcare accessibility and the importance of treating all patients with dignity. This wasn't about my wife and me, he told Channel 7 News. This was about a system that had allowed discriminatory practices to continue unchecked. When institutions fail to address bias proactively, they create environments where incidents like this become inevitable. The hospital's patient satisfaction scores improved dramatically in the following months. Exit surveys consistently mentioned the respectful treatment patients received from all staff members. The incident had created a culture of accountability that extended far beyond the original problem. Professional medical associations used the case as an example of how leadership should respond to discrimination. Dr. Washington received speaking invitations from conferences across the country, where he emphasized the business case for inclusive healthcare practices. Discrimination isn't just morally wrong, he told audiences. It's economically stupid. When you exclude patients based on bias rather than medical need, you're literally turning away revenue while damaging your reputation in the community. The ripple effects extended beyond St. Catherine Hospital. Other medical facilities in the region began reviewing their own policies and training programs, afraid of facing similar public scrutiny if discriminatory incidents occurred on their watch. 3 weeks after the incident, Kesha went into labor at 2:30 in the morning. Benjamin drove her to St. Catherine Hospital through empty streets, both of them nervous about returning to the scene of such trauma. But the hospital that greeted them was transformed. The overnight staff treated Kesha like visiting royalty, but more importantly, they treated her like a human being deserving of respect and excellent care. Nurses checked on her frequently, doctors explained every procedure, and everyone addressed her by name rather than as the patient in room 12. "How are you feeling, Dr. Washington?" asked Jennifer, the night nurse who had replaced Patricia. "Is there anything we can do to make you more comfortable?" The labor progressed smoothly, and at 6:47 that morning, Hope Washington made her entrance into the world. 8 pounds, 2 ounces of pure possibility, with her father's determined chin and her mother's intelligent eyes. "She's perfect," Benjamin whispered, tears streaming down his cheeks as he held his daughter for the first time. "Absolutely perfect." Kesha smiled weakly but radiantly as she watched her husband cradle their child. "Hope," she said softly. "Her name is Hope because that's what she represents. Hope that the world will be better for her than it was for us." The medical team that assisted with the delivery reflected the hospital's new commitment to diversity. Dr. Patricia Martinez, the physician Kesha had originally been scheduled to see, personally attended the birth. The nursing staff included representatives from multiple ethnic backgrounds, all working together with seamless professionalism. "Mrs. Washington," Dr. Martinez said as she completed her final checks, "you and Hope are both healthy and strong. The delivery was textbook perfect." As news of Hope's birth spread through the hospital, staff members who had witnessed the original incident stopped by to congratulate the family and meet the baby who had become a symbol of positive change. Dorothy Chen, the elderly woman who had first spoken up for Kesha, arrived with a hand-knitted baby blanket. "Every child deserves to come into a world where they're judged by their character rather than their circumstances," she said, gently touching Hope's tiny hand. The story of Hope's birth became the perfect epilogue to a tale of confronting discrimination and creating change. Local newspapers ran photos of the Washington family, emphasizing how the incident had led to meaningful reforms in healthcare delivery. "Hope represents more than just our daughter," Kesha told reporters from her hospital bed. "She represents the possibility that future generations won't have to face the same prejudices we've encountered. She's proof that speaking up against injustice can create real, lasting change." Benjamin stood beside his wife's bed, one arm around Kesha's shoulders and the other cradling their newborn daughter. "3 weeks ago, this hospital failed my family. Today, it delivered our daughter with compassion, skill, and respect. That transformation gives me hope for the future of healthcare and for the world Hope will grow up in." The story of Kesha Washington's experience at St. Catherine Hospital became more than just a tale of discrimination confronted and justice served. It became a blueprint for how individuals and institutions can choose to address bias when it reveals itself in stark, undeniable terms. Viewers watching this story unfold should ask themselves uncomfortable but necessary questions. How often do we make assumptions about people based on their appearance? When we witness discrimination, do we speak up like Dorothy Chen, or do we remain silent observers? Are we willing to examine our own biases and change our behavior when confronted with evidence of our prejudices? The transformation at St. Catherine Hospital didn't happen because of policy changes or sensitivity training sessions. It happened because people witnessed the real consequences of discriminatory behavior and decided they didn't want to be part of a system that devalued human dignity. Dr. Benjamin Washington's response offers a model for leadership in crisis. He didn't seek revenge or public humiliation of those who wronged his family. Instead, he used his position of power to create systemic changes that would benefit future patients who might not have his influence or resources. Kesha's grace under pressure demonstrates the strength required to maintain dignity in the face of injustice. Her decision to stand firm while remaining composed showed everyone in that waiting room what true class looks like, and it has nothing to do with designer clothes or expensive jewelry. The birth of Hope Washington 3 weeks later provided the perfect conclusion to this story of transformation. In a hospital where her mother had been treated as unwelcome, Hope entered the world surrounded by respect, care, and genuine celebration of her arrival. This story reminds us that dignity isn't negotiable. Every person deserves to be treated with respect, regardless of their race, their clothing, their accent, or their perceived social status. When we encounter discrimination, whether we're experiencing it personally or witnessing it happen to others, we have a choice to make. We can remain silent and allow injustice to continue, or we can speak up and demand better from ourselves and our institutions. The Washington family's experience proves that individual courage combined with institutional accountability can create meaningful change. Share this story with others who need to hear it. Subscribe to Black Voices Uncut for more inspiring tales of ordinary people creating extraordinary change. Because sometimes the most powerful revolutions begin with a single person refusing to accept that dignity is anything less than a fundamental human right. Hope Washington's story began before she was even born, in a hospital waiting room where her mother refused to be diminished by prejudice. May her generation inherit a world where such courage is no longer necessary, but where the lesson of standing up for justice is never forgotten.